What if the reason you're still alone is because you're honest? Not broken, not unworthy, just unwilling to pretend. They tell you that depth is attractive, that being real will bring real love, but no one tells you that truth can make people walk away. On our first date, she asked why I never laughed at her jokes. I said, because they weren't funny, and I don't fake things. She didn't laugh either. She just left. And that's when it hit me. What if the very thing they say will make you lovable is the exact thing that makes you unchosen? Welcome to the silent curse of the conscious man. The silent curse of the conscious man. He walks into the room and immediately feels what no one is saying. The tight smiles, the nervous laughs, the subtle flickers in people's eyes when their words don't match their truth. He doesn't judge it, but he notices. And once you notice, you can't unnotice. He's not the kind of man who fakes laughter. He doesn't play dumb to be liked. He doesn't nod just to keep the peace. And that's why he's left out. He's not unkind. He just refuses to pretend. In a world where charm is currency, he trades in truth. And truth, as it turns out, is expensive. Too expensive for most. They say they want someone who's real. But when faced with someone who doesn't perform, who doesn't flatter, who doesn't play along, they call him difficult. Cold. Too intense. But the truth is, he's not too much. He's just too clear. And that kind of clarity makes people uncomfortable. Because being around someone who truly sees you, not your mask, not your charm, but your shadow, means you can't hide anymore. And here's the twist. He was told that honesty would bring connection. But it brought silence. He was told that awareness would make him magnetic, but it made him untouchable. He didn't become distant because no one cared. He became distant because everyone kept asking him to shrink, and eventually he stopped showing up, not out of bitterness, but out of grief. Because nothing hurts more than being asked to be less of yourself just to be loved. So now he stands at the edge of every room, quiet, not because he has nothing to say, but because he knows no one's really listening. So the question is, if being fully yourself makes people walk away, do you keep showing up, or do you start walking away too? He never raises his voice. He doesn't provoke, he walks in quietly, and yet somehow the room tenses. It's not because of what he says, it's what he sees. He notices the nervous twitch in someone's hand when they lie, the way laughter sharpens when people try to impress. He doesn't interrupt, he just observes. And that alone makes people nervous. Because you can explain away volume, you can blame emotion, but what do you do with a man who doesn't say much and still sees right through you? He's not trying to intimidate anyone, he just doesn't perform. He doesn't flirt out of obligation, he doesn't smile to survive, and so they label him too cold, too serious, too much. They say he lacks charisma, but the truth is, he just doesn't wear a mask. Here's the twist. He thought intelligence would bring connection, that self-awareness would create safety, but instead it made him unpredictable. And in a world obsessed with control, clarity becomes dangerous. Not because it hurts, but because it reveals. You can't manipulate someone who won't play the game. You can't categorize someone who doesn't follow the script. So instead people push him away, not because he did something wrong, but because he refused to be fake. He walks into rooms and breaks no rules, but breaks all illusions, and in doing so, he exposes how much of our world depends on pretending. So the question is, when society prefers the comfort of illusion, where does a man go when all he knows how to give is truth? He doesn't fall in love with the way you smile. He falls in love with what you're hiding behind it. He doesn't care about the filters, the curated lines, the performance. He wants to know what you're too scared to say out loud, what wakes you at 2 a.m., what you've never admitted, even to yourself. But in a world built for instant gratification, this kind of love feels dangerous. Because it doesn't flatter, it confronts. Modern romance rewards safety, quick replies, safe compliments, surface-level validation, just enough depth to feel intimate, not enough to feel exposed. But the conscious man? He doesn't want attention. He wants truth, not the pretty version, the unfiltered one. the one that costs you comfort. And here's the twist. Most people don't walk away because he's hard to love. They walk away because he sees them, and they're not ready to be seen. He notices when affection is a strategy, when vulnerability is staged, when connection is forced, and he won't play along. He doesn't ask you to be perfect. He asks you to be real. And in return, he offers something terrifying in its simplicity: clarity. But in a world addicted to chaos, clarity feels like a threat. So they leave. Not because he's cold, but because he won't let them hide. And love, for most, is still about hiding. He doesn't hate them for it, but he refuses to perform love of like a script. Because if love requires pretending, he'd rather walk alone. So ask yourself this: if you had to choose between being loved for your mask or being alone for your truth, which one would you choose? There's a myth about solitude, that it means failure, that the man who stands alone must have been broken, unwanted, unloved. But what if solitude is not a wound, but a form of rebellion? What if the quiet around him is not rejection, but proof that he never betrayed himself? He doesn't walk away because he's bitter. He walks away because staying would mean shrinking, smiling when he doesn't feel it, agreeing to be accepted, apologizing for his clarity, his sensitivity, his truth. And he won't, because every time he tries to fit in, something inside him dies. He used to twist himself into softness. He tried to be likable. He made his voice smaller, his gaze gentler, his truth easier to swallow. And still they left. Here's the twist. They didn't leave because he was wrong. They left because they were never ready for someone who didn't need to perform. And now he knows. He doesn't chase comfort anymore. He doesn't beg to be understood. He walks, not ahead, not behind, but alone. Because that's where the truth walks. People say he's too intense, too distant, too honest. But the truth is, they're afraid of being seen. Not the version they show the world, the version they've hidden even from themselves. And being around him, a man without masks, is a mirror too sharp for most to face. So now, when the room goes silent, as he enters, he understands. He's not being excluded, he's being protected. So ask yourself, if belonging requires performance, what are you really being accepted for? He used to explain himself. Why he said no, why he needed space, why he felt too deeply. He twisted his truth into something soft, something polite, hoping to be understood, hoping not to be abandoned. But no matter how carefully he spoke, they still didn't hear him. And eventually he stopped speaking, not out of bitterness, out of clarity. He realized that those who needed explanations were never listening. They were just looking for a version of him that made them feel safe, and he refused to be edited. He no longer offers footnotes for his feelings. He no longer waters down his presence to fit in fragile spaces. He doesn't need validation to feel real anymore. Here's the twist. They didn't misunderstand him. They understood just enough to know he wouldn't play along. So they called him cold, difficult, too much. But he's not too much. He's finally just enough for himself. He doesn't chase anymore. Not because he's proud, but because he's finally at peace. He doesn't seek love in performance, but in alignment. And alignment doesn't beg, it doesn't explain, it doesn't adjust its truth for applause. He walks differently now, not faster, just freer. And that freedom is quiet. It doesn't shout, it doesn't prove, it simply is. The man who once thought love required performance has learned that real love, the kind that stays when the mask falls, is rare. But it's worth the wait. So here's the final question. If being fully seen meant being fully alone, would you still choose to be real? Maybe the most dangerous thing you can do in this world is be yourself, without shrinking, softening, or performing. Not because it's wrong, but because it reveals how much of what we call love was really a negotiation between masks. Carl Jung believed that true individuation, the birth of the real self, can only happen when everything false is stripped away. And maybe that's why people leave. Not because you were unworthy, but because they were never ready for someone who didn't ask for permission to be real. So here's the final question. If authenticity means exile, is the cost of being fully known worth the silence that follows? Or worse, what if being truly seen was never the goal of this world in the first place? If this journey into the depths of the human psyche stirred something within you, don't let it end here. Subscribe to Carl Jung Mysteries and tap the notification bell so you never miss a revelation. Every week we uncover more hidden truths about your mind, your soul, and the strange world you live in. This isn't just a channel, it's an awakening. And you're part of it now.